is time for a new Q&A. Y'all have been asking a lot of really great questions here on YouTube, on Instagram, on Patreon, and I am so excited to get to them. For the sake of organization, I've grouped the questions into similar categories like creative questions, business questions, personal questions. You get the idea. So grab some coffee or a little snacky snack and let's chat. So let's start with the creative questions. Number 1, how do you pick your palettes and invent correct lighting, like saturation, value, and contrast? So over the years, I've really begun to hone in more on what color palettes I'm most drawn to using. I tend to gear towards more earthy, warm tones. Lots of greens and browns and soft reds. Earthy is my personal favorite palette, but more important than my preferences is what story I'm trying to tell with my artwork. Sometimes a piece just calls for something a little bit different, and I don't ever want to limit myself to the palettes that I most prefer or I'm most comfortable with. Lately, I've actually been exploring a little bit more purple and pink, and it's really been a fun challenge to kind of switch things up a little bit. It's funny you mentioned inventing quote-unquote correct lighting, because that's something I'm most self-conscious about in my artwork. Lighting is definitely a really big story driver in my illustrations, and I put a lot of pressure on myself to paint light correctly, which is hilarious considering the characters and the ideas in my work are anything but realistic. But when you're inventing a lighting setup, you do want to make sure that you're applying it throughout the piece so it makes sense to the viewer. Honestly, I think a lot of that just comes with practice. Doing a lot of studies from life to gain a better understanding of how light and shadow works, doing a lot of value thumbnails to learn how to convey an idea as simply as possible. One of the resources that was most helpful for me with learning lighting was Robert Kondo and Dai Sumi's Color and Light class on Schoolism. I'm not gonna lie, there is a lot of homework with that one, but it's a goldmine of information and you will walk away from it a better artist. If you're interested in a free resource for learning lighting, I did make a lighting theory video last year with some helpful tips as well. Number 2, any tips for drawing expressive poses and faces without them turning out stiff? That is a fantastic question. There's definitely a time and place for practicing anatomy from a learn the bones and muscles perspective, but at the end of the day, we're trying to tell a story. We want our characters to be dynamic and alive and full of expression and emotion. And that really comes down to gesture. Now, gesture isn't about anatomical accuracy, it's about conveying an idea. I love warming up with some 1 to 2 minute gesture sketches with websites like Line of Action and Quick Poses. It really gets your hand loosened up and helps you focus more on the movement in a pose rather than the nitty-gritty details. I'd also recommend checking out some of the Proco videos featuring Patrick J. Jones. He is an incredible figure artist, and his drawings are absolutely full of life. Another helpful trick is practicing the flower sack drawing method. It's this old animation exercise where basically you pose a flower sack like a person. It's easier to practice more gestural poses on a simple shape like a rectangle. As far as expressions go, honestly, that's something I struggle a lot with. I tend to draw a lot of my characters with the same kind of soft or smiley expression. Something that might be helpful would be to study cartoons like Avatar: The Last Airbender or Looney Tunes, Tom and Jerry. Just pause a scene and try sketching the facial expressions. So much of learning how to do something is just doing it over and over and over again. Mileage is very important. Number 3, what are some practice methods you used early on to improve? So going off of that last question, mileage is very important. The most important part of practice is doing it a lot. That said, the quality of your practice is also very important. I mean, you could sit and draw for 8 hours mindlessly and learn absolutely nothing, or you could draw for 1 hour totally in the zone, really taking in what you're doing and get a lot more out of it. Your mindset matters too. Mileage plus mindset equals growth. Honestly, early on, I didn't really have any clear methods of learning art other than just doing it all the time. I would finish school, pop on some cartoons, and just sketch till supper time. And then if we were watching a movie as a family, I'd probably be sitting and sketching some more. I brought my sketchbook basically everywhere with me. Now, I'm not at all saying that you have to sketch every day. In fact, I think sometimes that can be very damaging for artists if you become too legalistic about it. but I do think it's very important to be intentionally practicing pretty often. Number 4, what sparked your inspiration for bits and bobbles? I adore them so much and want to know it all. Oh, that makes my heart so happy. Truly, Bits and Bobbles and the Meraki Meadow in general is probably the project and story that's most dear to me. So it absolutely means the world to me when others really connect with them too. Okay, so let's begin at the beginning. A few years ago, the names Bits and Bobbles very randomly just popped in my head. So I wrote the names down and kind of left it alone for a little while. I didn't have any existing characters that needed names. But one day when I was sitting down to sketch, these squishy little forest characters emerged, and I was like,
oh, that's Bits and Bobbles. Hi!
They've gone through some pretty significant design changes over the last couple of years as I've finally figured out their proportions and such, but the more I started sketching them, the more they just shared their story with me. Honestly, I don't feel like it's something that I've really made. More so, they just feel like friends that are telling me more about themselves. Over time, I learned that Bobbles is a baker and he eats PB&Js every day. I learned that Bits is a botanist and goes on worldwide adventures to fill her plant field journals. So the Meraki Meadow aspect of it really began last year when I hit a particularly hard creative block. I just wasn't really enjoying art anymore, and I didn't really want to create anything. So I went back to these little characters that I loved so much in the hopes that they might spark a little bit of creativity again. So I was looking for an M word to name the meadow where they lived and stumbled upon the word Meraki, which means to do something with soul, creativity, or love, to put something of yourself into your work. And that word embodied everything that Bits and Bobbles are and everything the meadow they lived in could be. From there, the story of the Meraki Meadow blossomed, and it's grown into this whole little world full of characters who live by their own whimsical drumbeat and find joy in even the most mundane moments. I've also been filling this mini sketchbook with weekly Bits and Bobble sketches, and honestly, that has become one of my favorite parts of the week. I do share those weekly Meraki Monday sketches over on Patreon if that's something y'all are interested in. Number 5. How long does it tend to take you to finish a painting, single character versus full spread, from brainstorming to finished art? That's a tough one. It honestly varies so much. It can take me anywhere from 5 hours to 25 hours, honestly. Typically, paintings in my sketchbook only take me a few hours each. I don't usually create a color or value comp for those, which can cut down a little bit on time. I also tend to be a lot more looser and braver in my sketchbook, which does lend itself to speed. So for full illustrations on loose paper, I'd say probably between 12 and 18 hours is about average for me. I don't typically spend longer than a week on a painting, and I don't usually paint more than about 3 to 5 hours a day. That's going from the initial brainstorming sketches to the finished piece. I honestly don't think illustrations with more characters really take me any longer than illustrations with less. I think what has a greater impact is how detailed the background is for me. If it's an interior scene full of props, like the post office painting or the sweet shop painting, I definitely tend to take a lot longer on those. But something more simple like the hiking a hill painting, I think that one maybe took me 6 hours in total. I will say I have gotten a lot faster at painting over the years as I've learned more about color mixing and as my confidence in my painting skills has grown. Practice lends itself to speed too. Number 6, how do you get out of an imposter syndrome / comparison art slump? That is a really great question, and honestly, I think my answer is gonna irritate a lot of people. My number one tip for overcoming imposter syndrome is to limit your time on social media. We were just not meant to be flooded with so much information and influence from other people. I mean, the world around us is stimulating enough without having access to literally everyone and literally everything they create. I think it's wonderful to observe and appreciate the artwork of other people, but to be constantly inundated by it is definitely gonna lead to imposter syndrome and a lack of personal artistic identity. Hot take, I know. Personally, when I spend a lot of time on social media or Pinterest looking at other artists' work, I start to feel like 1, I'm not doing enough, 2, I should be doing something else like oil painting or practicing anatomy or, I don't know, macrame. And 3, I don't know what stories I want to tell anymore. I can be so easily over-influenced by other artists that I lose who I am as an artist. So recently I decided to take a step back from Instagram for a while. I deleted it off my phone, and I don't open it up on my computer. Since then, I've been getting into my sketchbook more because I'm not wasting so much time scrolling, my headspace feels less cluttered, and I feel like I have more artistic direction. It has been so good for me. And now when I do look at other artists' work, I look intentionally. I flip through an art book, I look at one artist's website versus 20 artists' Instagram accounts, I listen to my own intuition rather than letting what everyone else is doing influence what I do. Now, I'm not saying you need to go fully off the grid, unless you want to, in which case you are an inspiration, and I fully support you in that decision. But I do think setting limitations and consuming other artists' content very intentionally is the best way to get out of that comparison slump. Number 7, how do you decide what story to tell in your paintings? I love this question. Y'all know I am all about storytelling. Story is always key. I honestly believe that we are all filled with stories to tell, and those stories are so wildly and wonderfully different. For example, Annie Stegg's paintings tell very ethereal stories, while Devin L. Kurtz's paintings tell very adventurous stories. For me, I tend to lean more towards telling very cozy, very whimsical stories. Stories that either make you smile from silliness or warm you up inside like a cup of cocoa. I talked about the Marikey Meadow earlier and how the characters live in such a state of joy in their daily tasks and their love for life and its magically mundane moments. And honestly, that's what I love to paint the most. A combination of larger-than-life characters doing the things that we all do, like folding a basket of laundry or mailing a letter. I'm very inspired by the world and the people around me, and I love to tell those stories in my own paintings. So once I decide on a story, I choose a color palette, props, and characters that will help me tell the story to the best of my ability. I also really like to choose music to listen to that kind of puts me in the mood of the story. So recently I painted an illustration of a little girl who lives in a submarine. She's a jellyfish enthusiast, and she wakes up one night to the bioluminescent jellyfish glowing outside her window. So I listened to the theme from the Pixar movie Luca on repeat for hours and hours while I painted, because for some reason that song just embodies all of the wonder of the ocean for me. I also lighted my Kelpie's Secret Mythology candle because it has the best water vibes. I love to try to just imagine myself in the story as much as I can and make painting a whole experience. Number 8, how do you complete challenges and projects without getting distracted by new ideas? I don't. I am such a scatterbrain. My mother is one of the most wonderfully organized people, and she did not pass that trait on to me. I can be like full force on a project that I am genuinely excited about, and all of a sudden have a new idea and jump to the other train track so freaking fast. Now I do typically complete the challenges I set for myself though, but I'm definitely working on other things during those projects too. So during the 100 Scene Studies challenge, I was also still painting personal illustrations. During my 20 illustrations challenge last year, I was also still working on my sketchbook and doing other things. For example, last December, I think while I was still trying to finish up the 20 illustrations challenge, on a whim, I decided I was going to create a whole workbook for creatives to nurture their creative practice, and that I was going to launch that prototype to my patrons at the beginning of January. Now, was this a reasonable goal to set for myself?
Absolutely not.
But when I get excited about something, I throw myself into it full force and typically miraculously somehow get it done. Sometimes short deadlines are kind of the kick in the pants I need to actually get things completed, which is probably not healthy, but anywho. Number 9, how do you keep creative juices flowing and deal with art block? Okay, I am very passionate about this topic. So this is one of the things we explored a lot in the Nurture workbook because so many creatives, myself included, struggle with burnout on a regular basis. I think we tend to view burnout as a lack of creative energy, and I don't believe that's true. Burnout is when the passion for creativity has been depleted, not the creativity itself. Artists don't just lose their creative energy, it's still there. Somewhere inside you, you have that itch to be creative, whether it's painting or playing an instrument or, I don't know, baking bread. That energy needs to go somewhere. To get out of burnout or art block, you need to nurture your love for the creative practice to get the juices flowing again. So when I'm dealing with burnout or art block, first and foremost, I try to remember to have grace on myself. I am not a perfect person, and I'm gonna deal with imperfect situations. There's gonna be a lot of off days where either I don't create or I don't like what I create. But in those times, I think it's important to ask yourself why you're feeling burnt out. Have you been overworking yourself? Are there external influences that are draining your energy? Oftentimes when dealing with burnout, we're far too quick to point the finger at creativity itself, but more often than not, it's external influences that are causing our creative juices to just stop flowing. So if you've been overworking yourself creatively, then maybe focus on some creative cup fillers. Go for a walk and look at the beautiful world around you. Or maybe you sit down with an art book for 20 minutes to read someone else's thoughts on creativity. Pop in a Ghibli movie and fangirl over the backgrounds. After you fill your creative cup a little bit, gently ease back into the art. Focus on low-pressure creativity like 2-minute doodles, or a study of a photo on Pinterest, or simply swatching some of your paints. It really can feel like you're never going to be able to create anything again when you're in a rut, but I promise you, you're going to get through this art block. You are never alone in burnout. Every creative goes through it. Number 10, have you tried other forms of art? So I'm not fully sure what you mean by this exactly, so I'm gonna just answer it the best I can. I would say yes, if you mean like other forms of art such as music, dance, drama, that kind of stuff. Art outside of the visual arts. So music has always been a massive part of my family. My mother is an incredible singer and flautist. She actually got the John Philip Sousa Award, which is pretty cool. My sister is an incredible singer, pianist, composer, lyricist. My dad doesn't sing, but he's always really appreciated music. I sing a little bit and took piano when I was younger. I do play a little bit of ukulele. I love fingerpicking.
But I don't put in enough practice to actually be good at it.
I did always want to do dance, but our local dance studio was pretty expensive, so I never got around to that, but I could definitely see myself taking dance lessons at some point in the future. I also really enjoy writing as a little bit of a hobby. I love baking. I would definitely consider that an art form. I'm a really big fan of the art of flavors and plating. But yeah, I love trying pretty much anything creative. Number 11, how did you start art? Okay, so I've been drawing basically since I can remember. My mom used to get like big rolls of butcher block paper, and my sister and I would just go to town on it with crayons and markers. Creativity was always something that was very, very heavily fostered in my family. We were always listening to music, there were always art supplies available. You know when you're like 3 and you're not good at anything? Like, my drawings were maybe worthy of being hung up on the fridge, not the Louvre. But my parents always nurtured a love and an appreciation for creativity in my sister and I, and encouraged us to pursue things that excited us. Number 12, who inspired you to do art? So like I said, I've kind of always done art, so there wasn't really anyone particular that inspired me to start, I guess. But I've definitely had a lot of inspiration over the years. Y'all know I am president of the Chris Hong fan club.
And I will throw hands if anyone tries to take that spot.
I really love the Golden Age illustrators like J.C. Leyendecker and Norman Rockwell. I'm also very inspired by the artists who painted the Studio Ghibli and classic Disney backgrounds like Ivan Earl and Kazuo Oga. Devin Kurtz is another big inspiration with her incredible use of light and color. Justin Donaldson, Jamila Knopf. I love Schmo Draws. Her characters are so expressive, so fun. My best friend, Art of Hannah Young, such an icon.
I'm also president of her fan club.
Genuinely, I'm so inspired by so many wonderful artists, and I really do love finding elements I can incorporate into my own work from each of them. Number 13, what are basic things you should learn in art, and what do you think would help in improving art? I know we've all heard it before, but learning the fundamentals is very, very important. Those basic skills like perspective, color theory, values, Those are skills that kind of stretch across the whole realm of art. I hesitate to make blanket,
this is exactly what you should learn
kind of statements, because we're all very different artists, and we don't all need to learn the exact same things. For example, if you hate drawing people, don't worry about taking figure drawing classes. If you're pursuing a career in character design, then don't devote all your practice time to drawing environments. I think it's really important to pursue the elements of art that really interest you. Like I said, there are some things that apply to almost every artist. Composition's pretty important. That said, those fundamentals can also be pretty boring to learn sometimes. But we all have to put in the time and effort to learn it. If you're at the beginning of your art journey and you don't really know what your quote-unquote thing is yet, I'd encourage you to just try a lot of things and gain a basic understanding of the fundamentals. From there, you can kind of see what you like, and you can start to tailor your education and practice towards that. For example, if you're really interested in pursuing illustration, then start focusing more on character design and building your portfolio. If you've discovered a passion for ink drawings, make line quality a part of your regular practice. And I cannot stress this enough, keep coming back to the basics. I talked a lot in this video about how it's really easy to become a little bit stale in your practice as you improve as an artist because you don't really think you need to practice anymore since you've already learned something. But skills are like muscles. You gotta keep using them if you want to keep them strong. Stay humble and don't ever be afraid to go back to the basics. Most importantly though, don't lose your passion for art. Improving means nothing if you don't love what you're doing. Now, of course, there's gonna be some rough patches where you're doing some of the drills you don't enjoy, but you should still have an overall love for your creative practice. Number 14, what kind of art education have you had? So I had a couple of art teachers when I was in elementary and middle school. They were both high school students who were really excited about art, and they made me more excited about art too. I talked quite a bit about my journey through kind of DIYing my art education in this video, so definitely check that out if you want more of the nitty-gritty specifics. I kind of hesitate to use the term self-taught because I don't think any of us are truly self-taught. We're always learning from other artists, whether that be from observing character design in movies, reading art books, going to an art museum, but I haven't technically received a formal art education. I didn't go to college for art.
I didn't go to college at all for that matter.
But I am constantly getting an art education. I take a lot of art classes online through sites like Schoolism. I recently took Justin Donaldson's gouache course, which was absolutely fantastic. Definitely want to take his landscape course at some point. I'd also really love to take some in-person figure drawing classes. But yeah, I think you can get an art education without going to school. I've heard a lot of really mixed reviews about going to art school, and between my health and my finances, it just wasn't the right option for me. DIYing my art education has allowed me to pursue what interests me, to go at my own pace, and to learn within my budget. It's also allowed me to build my art business while I'm learning. There are so many incredible resources out there that I don't really think it's necessary to go to art school if A, you can't, or B, you don't want to. That said, I don't think the DIY route is for everyone either. It requires a lot of self-discipline, which is something I do struggle with, not gonna lie, and it does require you to put in a lot of effort to building a curriculum path that suits your particular needs. Number 15, how did you learn to master anatomy and gesture? First of all, thank you. That is an incredibly sweet question, as it implies that I have mastered anatomy and gesture. I haven't. I think I'm still a long ways from mastering either one of those, but it absolutely means the world to me that you think so. Okay, how did I learn it? Y'all know I will never promote products or books that I do not personally love, but truly what changed the game for anatomy for me was the book Dynamic Human Anatomy by Roberto Osti. It's about 35-ish American dollars, and it is worth every single penny. It's kind of like this all-in-one anatomy art book where you walk through the art history behind anatomy, you dive into the bones and the muscles, you learn about the natural rhythms throughout the human body, and how you can turn that into figure drawing shorthand. What I love most about the book is that it combines anatomy with gesture. So you're learning the bone and muscle building blocks and still getting to draw fun figures that are dynamic and very full of life. The book really keeps things interesting. So I keep a sketchbook that's purely for figure drawing practice, and I'm always drawing a lot of characters in my regular messy sketchbook too. Schmodraws has some excellent resources for drawing very gestural characters. I love using her body bean method and stick figure method for getting poses down without too much structure involved. I'm always kind of bouncing back and forth between anatomy and gesture to figure out how I want to draw characters. Learning the proportions I like to use, what kind of bony and muscular landmarks I want to include. For example, I really love including the brachioradialis in my character drawings. It's that really beautiful muscle that overlaps from the elbow crease down to the thumb side of your wrist. And it gives a lot of really great gesture to an arm. But I don't typically include much of a bicep on my characters because it's not really a muscle that makes sense for the characters I draw. I think if you love drawing characters, learning anatomy is absolutely fantastic and gives you a lot of great ground to work with. And once you learn it, you can use what you want from it and discard what you don't want from it. Number 16, tips for finishing artwork. My number one most important tip for finishing artwork is to put it away for at least a weekend. It is so hard to tell if a piece is finished or not when you've been staring at it nonstop for hours or days on end. Typically, one of two things will happen if you don't step away. Either you'll overwork the piece and it's going to lose that raw, genuine quality it had in the beginning, or you won't be able to see the one or two glaring things that need to be changed to actually finish it. Simply by stepping away for a couple of days and taking a break from it, you're gonna be able to come back with a fresh pair of eyes and see it for what it is. So I recently did this with one of my paintings. I thought it was totally finished, left for the weekend to visit my sister, came back and was like,
Oh, crud! I totally forgot this one really important prop I wanted to include.
It was a super quick fix, but it's one that I probably wouldn't have caught if I hadn't stepped away for a few days. Number 17, I'd like to hear more about the process before you actually begin to paint. Are you using a sketchbook, especially for doing the sketches for your paintings? Yes, I am always working in a sketchbook. More often than not, I don't just sit down and go,
I'm gonna make a new illustration this week.
Lots of times I just kind of stumble on an idea in my sketchbook and build on it from there. Like I said earlier, I am so passionate about storytelling, so I spend a lot of time in the brainstorming stage trying to build a scene that tells the story I want to tell. I do a lot of character sketching, a lot of prop sketching. After that, I dive into finalizing my sketch and planning out the painting. Sometimes my paintings are very, very planned with lots of color and value comps, and other times I jump straight into the painting with absolutely no plan and just kind of trust my artistic intuition. We actually just did a deep dive into developing an illustration from brainstorming to finished piece in the Curious Creatives tier on Patreon. If you're interested in going through the curriculum, I did put it up in my shop as a digital download. It's about 50 pages of material where we walk through brainstorming, sketching, planning, starting the final piece, and actually finishing an illustration. The piece I'm painting here is one of the ones we walked through together in the course, as well as the Go Fish illustration from a few videos ago. Number 18, how much time does it take you to get the pencil sketch finished? Again, this varies wildly. Anywhere from half an hour to upwards of 4 hours. I think it typically takes me longer when I work digitally because I tend to get a little bit more nitpicky, whereas if I go straight in with pencil on my final surface to sketch, I have to be a lot more intuitive and just start throwing some marks down on the page. It also kind of depends on how complicated the illustration is. So for this one, I had a little bit of a thumbnail sketch I was going off of, and the finished sketch took me, I think, about half an hour to do. For the painting I just finished, that isn't out yet, that one took me, I think, about an hour and a half to do. All right, let's move on to some business questions. Number 19, would you consider art as only your hobby or your career? As of right now, it's my career. I'm a full-time artist, as full-time as I can be, I guess. Does it pay a full-time salary at the moment? No. But my art business has definitely grown a lot this year, and we are on our way to a reasonable income. Number 20, when and how did you decide to become a full-time artist? About the time I realized I wasn't really good at anything else. All jokes aside, I always kind of wanted to have some sort of business. I wanted to build something of my own. For a while, as a kid, I actually wanted to own a pet spa, but that idea fell apart in like 5th grade, I don't know. So I've talked before on my channel about growing up as a chronically ill kid. There were a lot of hospital visits, a lot of doctor's appointments, multiple surgeries. So I actually kind of considered going to school to become an art therapist for a children's hospital. Like I said earlier, college didn't end up being the right path for me, so art therapy kind of fell by the wayside. But that did make room to pursue a career as a full-time artist. I'm still kind of figuring out what exactly that looks like as far as different income streams go, but by the grace of God, it's growing and I'm having fun, so I guess we're just gonna keep at it. Number 21, how do you manage your time to do art, film, and edit videos? I don't. My time management skills leave a little something to be desired. I'm working on that. Lately, I do feel like I've gotten into a better routine that is functional but flexible for me. It leaves room for the life things that inevitably come up while still allowing me to get done the things that I need to do. I've also gained a lot of speed when it comes to script writing and editing. The more I do it, the faster I get at it. I think most important is finding a balance between making the art and making the art videos. I can't make videos if I don't have art to put in them, so. Where do you find time to make so many drawings and paintings and post so much? Is this your full-time job? Yep, this is my full-time job, so this is what I work on. If I had a different full-time job or even a part-time side job, I definitely would not be able to make as much art or post as frequently. I mentioned earlier that I've also taken a break from Instagram, which definitely has given me more time for art and for editing YouTube videos. I think finding time is all about prioritizing what's most important to you. To make one thing a priority means something else can't be. And I'm finally figuring out what platforms and pursuits to invest my time in as an artist and which ones not to. That's definitely a game of trying different things and failing and learning what works and what doesn't through those failures. Number 23, where do you get your prints done? So I get my prints done online through MPix. They're pretty affordable, and more importantly, they are fan-freaking-tastic quality. So I get the G clay prints on fine art photographic paper, which has this kind of subtle watercolor paper texture to it, and it makes it look like an original. Their color quality is incredible, their customer service is top-notch. On the very, very rare occasions that I've had like a misprint or something, they always get it fixed ASAP, free of charge, which I'm a fan of. 10 out of 10, recommend. Number 24, what is your daily routine like as an artist? I would love to say that I have a fine-tuned daily routine, but honestly, it changes week to week, sometimes day to day. I usually alternate between an art week and a video editing week. So I typically wake up around 6:30 or so, and I am a breakfast gal. I either whip up a smoothie bowl or some scrambled eggs with sausage and a pancake. Either way, I'm having coffee. Life does not start before coffee for me. After breakfast, I take Amy Jane outside, and then we come back in to get started with work. On Monday mornings, I do my American Monday sketch, which you can see every week on Patreon in any tier, including the free one. I also try to do my quiet time in the morning, get my day going with some scripture, but sometimes I'm just in a sketching mood and need to spend some time with a pencil and paper. Lately, I've started incorporating a bit of sketching time into every morning, and honestly, that's been really good for me. Whether it's 20 minutes of sketching or like an hour and a half of sketching, it just gets me in a really good creative headspace. Now, I'd like to say I avoid my phone in the mornings, but that's not true. I am a chronic email checker, and I'm trying not to be, but I'll be honest, it's not going very well. So during a video week, Monday is typically my script writing day, Tuesday is my audio recording and audio editing day. Sometimes I try to rough cut the footage on Tuesdays if I have a little bit of time. Wednesday is when I really hit editing the footage hard. I get the rough cut finished, add the music, watch it through, and make notes on what fun stuff I want to add, like text,
Funny voices,
graphics, all that jazz. Then I put it all together and get it scheduled to go out on Thursday at 2 p.m. CST. Editing Wednesday is always very, very full for me, so I like to treat myself to a little matcha latte in the afternoon. Annie and I also typically go for a walk most days before lunch. I tend to get decision fatigue, so I'm a really big fan of limiting decisions for myself. So I typically eat the same thing for lunch basically every day. Either chicken salad with a bunch of veggies, some cheese, preferably Gouda, and some chips, or I make a deli sandwich, also with a bunch of veggies and chips. So at the end of a video editing week, I typically start working on my next illustration, doing a lot of brainstorming and sketching, and getting the final sketch transferred to my watercolor paper. For an art week, I like to get the base layers done within the first day or so I can spend the next few days rendering it out and finishing things up. That kind of time frame allows me to have the weekend away from it so I can come back to it the following week and make sure it's actually finished. I also like to get in some movement in the afternoons. I try to do weightlifting once or twice a week, a Pilates session, a yoga session. Because I have a lot of health issues, I'm very, very conscious about nutrition and the importance of daily movement. These are both non-negotiables for me. I can't put my best into my career if I'm not taking care of my body. So I usually go for another walk with Annie Jane and my dad after work each day. We spend a lot of time outside. Nature's great, you know? Typically my evenings are reserved for family time. Sometimes I'll do a little bit of sketching, like while we watch a movie or some things, and sometimes not. On average, I'd say I get about 4 to 5 hours of solid work in each day. Now, I am aware that that's not full-time in standard American culture, but that's the full-time that's manageable for me. Sometimes it's a little bit more, sometimes it's a little bit less. That's the beauty of being self-employed, is that my routine can be flexible where it needs to be. Sorry, this was kind of a helter-skelter answer. You asked about my daily routine, and I kind of gave you the
Jump around between weeks and hours of the day
answer. But like I said, my routine isn't exactly a this is what I do every single day kind of thing. Number 25, how would you start a YouTube art channel in 2024? Oh, that's a good question. So when I started my channel back in 2021, I was not very consistent at first. I was working at a coffee shop part-time and couldn't really devote the time needed to posting on a regular basis. So if I was starting a channel now, I would probably get several videos edited before posting anything, just so I had a little bit of a backlog of content. That way I could be consistent with posting without feeling rushed to get a new video done. When I started taking YouTube more seriously and did focus on consistency after quitting my barista job, I was posting every single week. And honestly, I don't know that I would do that now. I think in some ways it was good because it did gain traction faster. Because I was putting out a video every week, there was a larger library of videos for people to find me from. However, it was a lot, especially early on when I wasn't as fast with script writing and editing. So maybe I would start with posting every other week. Honestly, there's really no one-size-fits-all to growing a YouTube art channel. So much of it is about experimenting to find what works for you specifically. Our audiences come to us for different things, which means that our posting frequency will look different, our editing styles will look different, the content of our videos is going to look different. If I was starting a YouTube channel in 2024, I would definitely focus on experimenting to find what videos I love to make and what videos my audience wants to see. Number 26, Instagram versus YouTube versus any other social media for artists.
I don't know.
I'm kind of biased here because I really love YouTube and I really hate Instagram. I think in terms of longevity and actually building your brand and business as an artist, I would vote for YouTube. For one, YouTube actually pays you. Money is not the be-all end-all of being an artist, but if you're trying to build a business, money is kind of important. I also think a YouTube community is more engaged and excited about what you're doing than on other platforms. You've only got about 2 seconds of someone's attention span on Instagram. But on YouTube, you have the opportunity to be a part of someone's day. They can sit and watch you paint and listen to your commentary versus quickly throwing a heart at an Instagram photo and moving on to the next post. I feel like YouTube is more about building relationships and getting people excited about what you're working on. You get to know the artist more personally, and I really love that. I love feeling like we're friends hanging out on a little sketchbook date. Number 27. Which tips would you give someone who wants to start a professional art career? Build a fan base first through social media, have a shop first, do markets and art fairs, or something completely different? Like with YouTube, there isn't really a one-size-fits-all game plan, but I do think there are some things that work better than others as a general rule. For example, if you don't have any kind of fan base, I would not start a shop on your own website. Unless you have like the world's greatest SEO, no one will be able to find your products. That's where platforms like Etsy can be nice because to an extent, they do drive some traffic to you. You don't have to go into it with an existing audience. That said, building a fan base does not guarantee traffic to your own shop. I have over 100,000 followers on Instagram and almost none of my shop sales come from there. My audience on YouTube is where the majority of my sales come from. It's a much smaller number of people, but they're more engaged. I would focus more on the quality of the relationships you're building versus the quantity. You can make a fantastic living with 100 truly dedicated people in your community who really love your work. I do think having a Patreon once you start to build a community is a pretty good income stream. So I have a free tier, a $2 or pay what you want tier, and a $10 educational tier. Patreon's not my most significant income stream, but it does contribute. When people are really excited about the art you're making, they want to help support you in it, so giving them the opportunity to do that through something like Patreon or a tip jar in your shop is a really great idea. Markets and fairs. So personally, I haven't really had a lot of success with these. I think partially because I live in the Midwest and my style of art isn't really what connects with most people in this region. But I know a lot of people have great success with markets and fairs. I think you kind of have to gauge your art versus your location, and when in doubt, give it a try a time or two. If it doesn't go well, at least you tried. So much of building a professional art career is trying a lot of different things and finding what works for you specifically. A big tip though would be to have multiple income streams. Don't put all your eggs in one basket, like only doing commissions or only selling prints. Inevitably, income streams are gonna fluctuate, so having several you can depend on is a really wise decision. And start an email list. Just do it, it's free, and it gets your most dedicated fans in one location to where if a social media platform crashes or your YouTube gets hacked or I don't know, whatever, you still have a way to reach people. I use Beehive for my email list and it's been fantastic. This isn't sponsored, by the way, I'm just happy. I use it to write a newsletter every other week for cozy and curious creatives where I share new art, share some tips, share special discount codes for my shop, and with a newsletter, I don't have to worry about an algorithm pushing it out or not. It just goes to their email. Also, side note, if you're one of the wonderful people who has taken the time to respond to one or more of my newsletters, thank you so freaking much. You have no idea how much your replies literally make my day. Let's do a few random questions now. Number 28, what are some favorite books, whether they be novels or picture books growing up, that inspired you?
You brought up books.
Honestly, I could talk about books all day long. I've always been very inspired by the Winnie the Pooh books. They have these really beautiful spot illustrations in ink, and they're just lovely. The Morgan Crow books have been very inspirational for me too. For one, I just love them. They're absolutely fantastic. But for two, they're very imaginative, very immersive, and they inspire me to create art that feels like an experience. I think my favorite picture books have to be The Very Hungry Caterpillar and Goodnight Moon. Those were my go-tos as a kid, and they're still top-tier books, honestly. My parents always encouraged a very deep appreciation for reading in my sister and I. I did go through a phase early on, though, where all I read were Garfield comics for like 2 years. But even then, they were like,
you know what? She's still reading, and she's learning the language of sarcasm, so we'll call it a win.
Number 29, name your top 3 songs to listen to while you work. Like I said earlier, music is very, very influential for me when I work. It can totally change the vibe of what I'm making. So I'm a huge fan of listening to Joe Hisaishi music. He's the guy that wrote a lot of the Studio Ghibli soundtracks, so no surprise there. Asian Dream Song and Oriental Wind are my favorites by him. Oh, also Ashitaka and San from Princess Mononoke. That's a really great one. I don't know, I've also really been into like 50s and 60s music lately. A lot of Ricky Nelson, the Everly Brothers, Simon and Garfunkel. Oh, you asked for 3 though. Okay, Asian Dream Song by Joe Hisaishi, It's Up to You by Ricky Nelson, and Breaking of the Fellowship by Howard Shore. Soundtracks, man, that's where it's at for me while I'm painting. Number 30, favorite earth color. Does yellow count as an earth color? If so, then yellow. I'm also a really big fan of sage green. Number 31, what's your favorite non-Disney or Ghibli movie? Well, you absolutely called me out that my favorite movies are all animated. Okay, favorite non-Disney or Ghibli movie is definitely Dan in Real Life. 10 out of 10, hilarious, raw, real, amazing soundtrack, a must-watch for anyone. Number 32, what do you do when you're not creating art? Oh, that's a fun question. There are a lot of things I like to do. I love spending time with my family. They are absolutely amazing. We play a lot of board games. I kind of dominate at Settlers of Catan. I love being outside, whether that's going for walks, fishing, going for a drive. I love being active. I'm a big fan of yoga, Pilates, bar. I don't do bar as much anymore. My joints are a little sensitive, but I do still sneak it in on occasion. Reading, obviously. I always have a book or two that I'm going through. I also really love cooking and baking. Flavor is such an art form, and I love trying out new recipes. Number 33, what's your comment on beta AI? I will preface this by saying that I am not the most informed person when it comes to topics like AI. I think AI can be good for some things and very harmful for others. Obviously, AI stealing anyone's work,
Bad.
against it. But I think even with things like ChatGPT or AI proofreading or editing software, I think we run the risk of making things too convenient for ourselves. We take the hard work out of things and we're left with something less than human, and because of that, less than meaningful. I think when we rely too much on convenience tools, we stop the merit of something, the putting ourselves into our work. Like I said, I think AI can be helpful in some cases, but I think in the long run, I imagine it's going to be a lot more harmful than helpful. Number 34, who do you want a hug from when you're sad? My mama. She has magic hugs. Number 35, if you could live in a Disney movie, which one and why? Probably Snow White. I really love her cottage. My new hutch has very Snow White vibes, and I am not at all ashamed to say that's why I bought it. Honestly, I would just want to live in the cottage. Number 36, would you ever consider doing film photography? Although I do think film photography is very, very interesting, it's not really something that I have much interest in trying. Number 37, llama or sheep? Sorry, sheep, but I'm a llama fan. And our last question category, art supplies. Number 38, what are your favorite paints? I absolutely adore Winsor & Newton designer's gouache. They're pretty unbeatable as a brand. However, Knicker poster colors are right up there with them in my opinion. I also love that Knicker comes in pretty large containers, so I'm a lot more generous with my paint mixes. Number 39, what does your art space look like? Let's take a little tour, shall we? Here we have my adorable little art cart that my mom revamped in yellow and added some little paint hooks to. It holds all my go-to art supplies as well as my little camera tripod thingy. We have the desk with computer monitor, Harriet, a few miscellaneous supplies, and my brush holder. It's spinny, which is fun. And we have the art. We've got some Hannah Young, Chris Hong, more Chris Hong, Lisa something I can't read, Annie Stagg, a cool print I found at a thrift store, Morgan Crow fan art, another piece I found at a thrift store, me, Chris Hong, Annie Stagg, another artist I'm unsure of, me, Devin L. Kurtz, Justin Gerard, Chris Hong, a matching print to the other thrift store prints, Justin Gerard, Hannah Young, a couple other little art prints, and 2 more Annie Staggs. I kinda like collecting art prints, if you can tell. Number 40, do you have a least favorite art medium? If so, what is it and why? Canvas, no contest. I don't think that's technically a medium, it's a surface, but I hate it nonetheless. I use it when I have to, but I avoid having to at almost any cost. I don't know, man, the texture just really bugs me to paint on. Which is really funny because I prefer cold press watercolor paper to hot press watercolor paper because it's more textured. But something about canvas texture just grates on my nerves. Number 41, what is your least used gouache color? Probably Winsor Red. I just prefer Spectrum Red when I need something a little bit warmer. Number 42, are you sketching on watercolor paper? For finished illustrations, yes, I use Arches cold press watercolor paper. Our 43rd and final question, what sketchbooks do you use and recommend for gouache and water-based mediums? I have a lot of sketchbooks that I've cycled through, so let's take a look at each of them. This one's a Strathmore 500 series mixed media sketchbook. Honestly, it took gouache fairly well. It's a smoother tooth than I would prefer for painting, but it was definitely nice for the pencil sketches. This one's a Mossery mixed media sketchbook, and it alternates between a smoother tooth and a grittier tooth, which I actually really enjoy. I can pick which variant I want for different sketches. There's definitely bleed through with markers, but honestly, I think it takes gouache really pretty well. I wouldn't use a ton of very watery layers though. This one's a Stillman and Byrne cold press sketchbook. I thought it was pretty decent for mixed media. It took gouache pretty well. Again, bleed through with markers, but I have yet to find a sketchbook that doesn't. It did behave better with thicker gouache versus thinner gouache though. It did not take a lot of watery layers very well. This one is a cold press Etcher watercolor sketchbook. It takes gouache and watercolor absolutely fantastically. But I think this final one is my favorite though, the Pentalic Cold Press Aqua Journal. So I used this one for the second half of my 100 Scene Studies challenge, and I could not have been happier with it. I was easily able to paint on both sides of the page. It has a really nice format and size, and the paper was like the perfect amount of grit for me. Well folks, we have come to the end of our little Q&A session. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed chatting with me and watching me paint this little hide-and-seek illustration. If you'd like to purchase a print of it, I do have a couple available in my shop. Huge thank you to the Cozy and Curious Creatives over on Patreon for helping support my art journey. Y'all are the MVPs, and I appreciate you so much. If you're interested in another cozy little Q&A session, then head on over to watch this video next. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye guys!